everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And today I'll be talking a little bit about transparency and vulnerability. So in service of that, I figured I'd share that I was actually asked to do this talk 2 days ago. So 2 days is a quick turnaround, but you know, when the universe calls, you answer. So here I am, and we're in this journey together. So what you're seeing up here is a slideshow of quotes that I've collected over the years. Great quotes are one of the first things that showed me how powerful a perspective shift can be. The way you can see something familiar and known from a different angle and suddenly have a completely different idea about it. And I think that's a lot of what psychology is. Psychology is trying to show things from a slightly different perspective and see if people can move in a forward place for knowing it. So today we're talking about the emotionally fit leader. I'll tell you a bit about myself. My name's Dr. Emily Ann Holt. I'm a psychologist and psychological consultant. But I grew up in Silicon Valley. I've kind of been immersed in the world of tech for a long time. And while I was doing my clinical psych training, I was listening to my partner and friends and family who are working in tech, and they were telling me about the kind of issues they were facing at work. And it felt so clear to me that there's this huge blind spot in tech about how big of a role emotions actually play in the workplace, and how important it is that the leadership team be self-aware and understanding that they are bringing their stuff to work, and so they have to have a handle on it. So I found myself at the intersection of psychology and the tech world, really pushing the importance of self-awareness and emotional growth. And I was thinking a lot about this concept of emotional fitness. So you've probably seen this statistic or some variation of it. 1 in 4 people will experience mental health problems in their lifetime. And this was put out with really positive intentions. The idea was to try to destigmatize mental health issues and to show that it's more common than we think and to try to, ramp up resources for it. But to be honest, I really don't like this statistic because to me it still feels like it divides people. It makes it seem like 75% of us get through our entire life without struggling with a serious mental health issue. That just does not resonate with me. So I took the liberty of making my own chart. In my opinion, because everyone has mental and emotional health, everyone has mental and emotional health issues. We might not all be formally diagnosed with a particular disorder, but we are all dealing with the universal pain of being human. We all struggle with existential angst. We all have to deal with mourning, whether we're mourning a person or a job or a path we didn't take. And we're all thrown headfirst into this crazy word of adulting, which, let's be honest, the struggle is really real on that one sometimes. So I think it's time to sort of get away from this othering that we do, where we try to locate issues outside of ourselves that we're not wanting to face. In the tech world especially, I think emotional health has a really interesting role. Tech life, as you know, is stressful and it's high pressure. There's tons of depression and anxiety in this industry, and the industry is starting to see that and is trying to provide resources for that, which is so important. But beyond those kinds of acute issues, to be successful in tech, especially in a leadership position, you also have to have good communication skills, you have to have patience and empathy, you have to be able to form and maintain solid relationships. When you're a leader, especially, the stress and responsibility is even greater. You have to deal with a huge range of emotion, not only your own, but the emotions that your team is bringing to work. A metaphor I like to use is that a tech leader is a little like a parent. In that, like a parent, it is up to you to create a space that feels safe and valued, a space where your team feels safe and valued and included. You are setting the ethos and culture for an entire group of people because team members are going to naturally look to you, and by the way, they're going to look at what you're doing, not what you're saying, to think about how they're supposed to be at work. Also, like a parent, your unprocessed stuff gets put on your team. It leaks into the work, so it's really important to have some sense of it. Now, this is especially tough in tech because the culture sometimes favors the analytic and the rational over the emotional. But I think that this desire to keep our emotions out of work is a fantasy, sort of like this idea of work-life balance. What does work-life balance even mean anymore? I wouldn't know where to draw the line for most people between their work and their life, especially in tech. I mean, for the most part, people are doing things like working from home. They're going out with their colleagues. They're answering emails till midnight. More than ever, we're doing work we love, which means we're defining our life by our work in a new way. So for that reason, who you are anywhere is who you are everywhere. And if you think that you can have some emotions in your personal life and not bring any of those with you to work, I don't think you're seeing the whole picture. So this is why I think emotional fitness is so important. And at this point, I should probably tell you what emotional fitness is. I want to specify that it's not the absence of psychological disorders. So a person can be struggling with depression, they can have ADHD, they can be dealing with any number of things and still be emotionally fit. In my mind, emotional fitness is a commitment to looking inward, to processing through difficult emotions, and to working toward self-awareness and self-improvement. I like to use the metaphor of emotional fitness versus physical fitness. So when you think about physical fitness, everyone has a body, which means everyone has physical health. Some people struggle with chronic illness, others don't, but we're all going to get sick at various points, and we all have unique strengths and limitations that we have to attend to. I think people like to think that if they're not actively sick, that means they're healthy. But if you talk to someone who's really committed to their physical health, someone who's sleeping 8 hours and exercising every day and eating well, they'll tell you just because you're not ill doesn't mean that you're healthy. This is true with emotional fitness as well. Just because you're not struggling with daily panic attacks doesn't necessarily mean you have good emotional health. Like any fitness regimen, it needs to be maintained. It's an ongoing process, and there's always more work to do. Becoming emotionally fit is not quick, and it's not always easy, but if you're willing to work regularly on your emotional health, you're going to become emotionally strong, and this prevents issues down the line. Emotional fitness increases emotional intelligence, it improves leadership ability, and it makes a huge difference in relationships. Now, business, in a sense, is just a series of relationships. So as cliche as this sounds, the relationships you have in your life are really tied to the relationship that you have with yourself. The type of people you attract into your life, the type of relationships you have with them, are really going to depend on the work that you've done with your own self. So I thought a lot about this concept of emotional fitness, but I wanted to be able to kind of define it. I wanted to understand, well, how would you know if you were emotionally fit? How would a person know if they're doing well in that department? So I did some research. I talked to 100 psychologists and entrepreneurs. And I did both of these things because I wanted the psychological, scientific perspective, but I also wanted to know specifically what does this look like in tech. And I asked all of these people, what does it mean to you to be emotionally healthy? How would you know if you were sitting across the table from an emotionally healthy person? I got all kinds of great answers. One of my psychologist friends said, the people who insist the hardest on their own total self-awareness and emotional health are often the least so. And I think what they were trying to say is, just like with knowledge, the more you know, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't actually know. And the same is true of our own self. I think we like to think we have a really solid handle on ourselves, but actually the more you learn about yourself, the more you realize how much you're hiding from yourself and how much of what's going on inside you is sort of happening without you even being totally aware of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each of these. So I took all of the answers that I got, and I kind of boiled them down into these 7 traits, these 7 pillars of emotional fitness. These are the traits that you would see in someone who seems to be working actively on their emotional fitness. So I'm going to tell you about each of the 7 traits, and then I also, for each one, give a suggestion about something you might do if you want to kind of kickstart your emotional fitness regimen around this trait. So let's dive into that. The first trait of an emotionally fit leader is the capacity to identify and manage their own emotions. An emotionally fit leader is self-reflective. They know their triggers and biases. They're patient, they're resilient, they can tolerate frustration. They know that their feelings about other people are really important information about what's probably going on within their own self. Just knowing your emotions gives you a lot of power over them. If there's one really important lesson I've learned as a psychotherapist that I wish I could tell everyone about, it's that I don't think people have any idea just how much their emotions are driving their actions without even realizing it. So the more you know about yourself, the more you're going to be able to move through life with intention. So how do you cultivate this capacity? How do you get better at identifying and manage your own emotions? This might not be a huge surprise, given who's giving the advice here, but to me, it's all about get yourself into therapy. The work you can do for the world is very tied to the work you've been willing to do on yourself. And there's a lot of misconceptions and stigmas about therapy. I think a lot of people believe that therapy is something you do when you're trying to get to the other side of something, when there's something really wrong or you're in a crisis or you're needing help kind of getting through something. And don't get me wrong, that's a really good time to seek the support of a therapist. But actually, therapy is really good for anyone who wants to understand themselves and the way that they're moving through the world. In fact, when you're not in crisis, that's when you're going to be able to do a whole new level of the work. Think about our metaphor of physical health. When you're sick or you're battling the flu, that's not when you're going to go to the gym, right? You're focusing on just getting yourself back to the baseline and being relatively healthy. And then once you are, then you're in a better position to do the kind of deeper work of getting stronger and more resilient and probably preventing yourself from certain sicknesses down the line. This is also true with emotional health. When a person's in crisis and they go to therapy, then that's probably what the focus is going to be on. But if you can get yourself to therapy when you're not in crisis, that's when this amazing, deep, profound work happens, where you get to really delve into the things that are driving your actions that you might not even be aware of. You get to explore your relationships. You get to understand who you are and what are the things that you're doing that are beneficial for you and what are the things that you're doing that there might be room to change. The other thing is, as a leader of a tech company, it's really helpful to have a safe and confidential space to talk about your stress and anxiety so that it doesn't get leaked into your team. This is going to benefit you, your team, the company, everyone around you. All right, trait number 2, the capacity to identify and tolerate the emotions of other people. So the emotionally fit leader can and does put themselves in other people's shoes on a regular basis. They recognize and can tolerate the idea that people are going to have different feelings than they do, and they consider the way their decisions are going to affect other people. So as a leader, you're often in a position where you have to make a unilateral decision or an unpopular decision, and that's just kind of the truth of the job. But the emotionally fit leader is one who really considers what the feelings are going to be that come of this decision, and they're going to be someone who's willing to, be there with those things, who understands their place in it and that they're in a unique position to support a person through it. So how do you cultivate this trait? Well, I suggest check in with your team often, and don't just listen, empathize. So when you're checking in, don't just check in about how their project is going. Check in about how they're doing, right? See the people on your team as whole people. And when you listen, don't just listen, empathize. Now, empathy involves a feeling component. If you intellectually understand what a person is feeling, but you're not feeling any of it, that's not empathy. Empathy means that you actually let yourself feel something in order to understand what's going on for the other person. Now, this doesn't mean you take on those problems as your own. Checking in and really listening and empathizing does not mean that their problems are now your problems and that it's your job to fix them somehow. It just means that you're really present with the person. I think sometimes people worry, I don't want to encourage people bringing feelings into work. It's not my job. I'm not their therapist. Right, it's not your job to fix their problems. But whether you like it or not, whether they like it or not, they are bringing those emotions into work. And so to make a space to confront them and be with them in those feelings is going to increase the sort of genuine and authentic kind of presence that they have there. The other thing is, I think it's important to invite feedback regularly from your team. And when you get feedback that's tough to hear, you have a chance to model what it looks like to take something in and really consider it even when it's uncomfortable. So that later on, when you have to give your team members difficult feedback, they'll have had an example of what it looks like for someone to really think about something that doesn't necessarily feel good and to take it seriously and not to act defensively right away. Trait number 3 of the emotionally fit leader is the capacity to play. The capacity to play is a really important developmental milestone. I love the improv definition of play, which is play means saying yes and. So an emotionally fit leader is someone who says yes and. They take up other people's ideas, they try them on, they build on them, right? Play builds community and culture, it improves memory, it increases creativity and spontaneity. I even read one study that showed that people who integrate play into their life in a regular way live longer by a significant number of years. So how do you increase your capacity to play? Well, you have to play more. There's a psychologist named Michael Parsons who says, play functions to sustain a paradoxical reality where things can be real and not real at the same time. I love this definition, and especially in the tech environment, this is super important. Tech is about innovation. It's about creating something that wasn't there before. There's a quote that was on my slideshow that said, anything new that's ever come about has been a result of play. So if it's your job to help people create, then you have to be willing to play with them. And play is actually really tough to do because it's vulnerable. When we play, our guards naturally come down. And for people who work really hard to keep their guards up, that can be a scary thing. But if you build play into your routine at work in a regular way, you'll see really big benefits in the way that the team members interact with each other and with you. All right, trait number 4, the capacity to face and handle reality. So this is an interesting one. Essentially, this is saying that an emotionally fit leader is someone who can see and tolerate the difference between what they want to be true and what is true. They have awareness of their limitations and the awareness of the limitations of their team and company, and they can endure those limitations without denial and defeat. Low emotional fitness in this particular area tends to look like people discounting facts and truths that don't match their desire. And this is really dangerous for a company. You've seen examples in the news that shows how quickly a leader's strengths can become their weaknesses if they're not willing to examine themselves in an ongoing way and if they're not willing to see what's right in front of them. So how do you increase this capacity? Well, I suggest attending to your emotional health even when things are going well. Because if you build up some resilience when things are going well, then when you do have to face that difficult reality, you'll be slightly better equipped to do so. Just as with any type of fitness, it's important to be proactive. A lot of issues are easier to prevent than fix. And tech life is really unpredictable. It's constantly changing. You really have to kind of shore up your resources. Now, if you are the leader of a company, and it's in your power to actually create the culture of the company, then it's really important to build wellness initiatives into the structure of your company. So as a great example, you can think about GitHub. GitHub does all kinds of really cool things. They have mindfulness Fridays, they have wellness meetings, they cover a good portion of therapy in their insurance, they have a private affinity group for people who are dealing with mental health issues. So not only are they providing the resources to their employees, they're also saying, this has value to us, it's worth investing in, we believe in it. All right, trait number 5, the capacity to tolerate discomfort. If I were to boil down what I think any kind of self-improvement really is, I would say it's about tolerating discomfort better than you were before. I can't even begin to tell you how much of what people do day to day is in service of moving away from discomfort. And then so often, the action we take to move away from the discomfort ends up making us feel more uncomfortable than the original discomfort was. If you are an emotionally fit leader, it probably means that you will have the capacity to slow things down a little bit, to sit with and process the discomfort. An emotionally fit leader also knows what makes them uncomfortable, and they have a sense of what they tend to do to move away from that discomfort, so that when the situation arises, they can kind of recognize it and see if there might be other options available to them. So I'll give you an example. I worked with a woman in a leadership position who was especially uncomfortable with awkward silences. She just hated awkward silences, and so whenever there was one, she filled it. She just said whatever was on her mind. And a lot of times afterwards, she would feel shame and embarrassment that she had said something she didn't really mean to say, and she wished she hadn't said it, but it was just so awkward, she couldn't handle it. So a lot of our work was about learning to tolerate the discomfort of these silences, which means it happened between she and I, right? Now, I don't know that we got her to a place where she loved silences, but as she became a little more comfortable with the discomfort that came up in silences, she felt less of a need to run away from it and more of an ability to just kind of sit with it. And what she found was that out of these silences came all of these profound, interesting things that might never have surfaced had she filled them. Right? So in conversations with people and her team, suddenly there was room for thoughts to kind of bubble up from down below that might not have had time or room to do so if that silence had been filled right away. So how do you increase your capacity to tolerate discomfort? This sounds a little roundabout, but essentially you have to get more uncomfortable being uncomfortable. Emotional fitness is about proving to yourself that you can handle discomfort, that it's not going to kill you. If you're making a decision or taking an action purely to move away from discomfort, then it's time to reflect. I think a really good way to do this is yoga. If you think about what yoga is, it's literally putting people in physically uncomfortable positions and then asking them to pay attention to what's coming up for them. And it helps people understand their particular relationship to their discomfort. So think about a yoga class where the teacher is having people hold Warrior 2 for like 5 minutes, and people are exhausted and their legs are shaking and they're super uncomfortable. Now, if you were to take 3 different people and you were to go into their minds, person number 1 might be sitting in this pose thinking, I'm awful at this. I never should have come here. I am terrible at yoga. Everyone else is clearly fine. I'm the only one who is terrible, and I should never have come. Person number 2, in the same amount of discomfort, might be thinking something like, this teacher is a sadist. I can't believe that she's doing this to us. She's the worst. I'm definitely never coming to this particular class again. And then person number 3, let's say the person who's been doing some work on getting more comfortable with discomfort, they might be thinking, okay, this is really hard, but it's not going to last forever. I know I can do it. I'm getting stronger. I got this. All right, so trait number 6, the capacity to handle criticism, feedback, and failure. Now, I want to say this isn't easy for anyone. Nobody likes being criticized. Nobody likes failing. But I think the emotionally fit leader is the one who knows that they're going to learn more from failure than they would from success. I think emotionally fit leaders are not defensive, or that might be pushing it because we're all defensive. I think they can at least recognize and admit when they're being defensive. And they can entertain opinions that are different than their own. I think emotional fitness is about feeling that your desire to grow is genuinely greater than your desire to avoid criticism or failure. Because if what you really want is to grow, then I think you understand that growth comes more from these things than if everything had gone perfectly. So how do you get better at handling these things? Well, I think a lot of it is just about practicing being vulnerable. Allow yourself to feel the full range of human emotion. Make and admit when you've made mistakes. I often refer to this idea that the perfect parent does not prepare their child for an imperfect world. By that I mean, as a tech leader, it's not your job never to fail or never to make a mistake. It's about being willing to own up to it and to deal with what comes of it, to ask for help and support. Showing your team what it can look like to handle a mistake head on and in a healthy way is probably going to be more helpful and useful to them than if you've never made a mistake at all. People often worry that as a leader, they're not supposed to be vulnerable because people are looking to them to be this pillar of strength. But modeling vulnerability without crumbling under the weight of it is a really important tool to have in the world of tech, especially because in tech, there are a lot of people who feel that they're the only one struggling or the only one who feels like an imposter or the only one who has no idea what's going on. And actually, those are pretty universal feelings. And if someone they respect can say, hey, I get that. I'm there sometimes, and here's what I do with it, that's really helpful. Finally, we have the capacity to communicate effectively. So the emotionally fit leader can put words to their needs and expectations. They're able to balance a healthy amount of transparency with optimism and confidence. People will say to me a lot, you know, you talk about how important transparency is, but I don't know if that's so true. I feel like as soon as I let on that things are wrong, everyone's going to freak out. But again, this is about balance. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you've started a company and it's not doing so well financially. You're pretty worried about it. You actually might have to shut it down. It's keeping you up at night, and you just don't totally know what you're going to do. Ideally, you're not going to turn to your team and they say, hey, how are we doing? Ideally, you're not going to say, everything's great. We're fine. You have nothing to worry about. We're good. Because people are perceptive. And when what you tell them doesn't match what you're clearly feeling or what's going on, that's a very uncomfortable thing. Even little kids tend to really know when their parents are kind of BSing them, right? So you don't want to do that. On the other hand, you don't want to turn to your team and say, it's all going to hell. We're going to lose everything. Start applying for other jobs. We're going to be homeless, right? That's not helpful either. They want to know someone who's at the front of the boat and has a handle on things. The emotionally fit leader is someone who can take stock of what they're feeling, they can metabolize it enough to find some kind of middle ground, which might sound something like, listen, the future here is really uncertain. I don't totally know what's going to happen, and that's scary, but we're in it together, and we're going to get through it. So how do you increase your capacity to communicate effectively? I think it's so important to find your community. A solid community of like-minded people is a huge asset in tech. If you can find people who are also committed to emotional fitness, like perhaps in a tech leader group, something like that, then you're going to have sounding boards and you're going to have people around you who can teach you the way they do things and can learn from you, and it can be really helpful. If you can reach out for help and offer help, if you can foster collaboration and not competition, you're going to find that a lot of things show up that might not have otherwise. I think all of us, somewhere deep down, has a worry that there isn't enough success to go around. I think we all kind of have this fear that success is like this pie, and every time someone gets a slice, there's less left for the rest of us. But my experience has actually been that the exact opposite is true. I think an emotionally fit leader is someone who understands that if you can elevate people, that you're also going to be carried up with them. Easier said than done, but I think if we can practice it and kind of opposite action it, right? So maybe in your head you're thinking, how can I sabotage this person who's also going for this promotion? And if instead you can say, how can I really make sure this person gets what they need and also be thinking about what I need? There's room for both of us. The other thing is, I think in this industry especially, networking is so prominent that we sometimes forget to connect to people for who they are instead of what they can do for us. But if you can connect with people for who they are, then you're going to be much more likely to get good feedback and communication and authenticity from them. All right, so those are the 7 pillars. And I figured I would give an example of what this work can look like when you are working on your emotional fitness. So this is a real-life story of Sam. I'm calling him Sam. When I met Sam, he was a 20-something-year-old man working at a really successful tech company in Silicon Valley. He was intelligent and sharp, and he was very confident. As a child, Sam grew up in a military family that really pushed the importance of facing problems head-on. The family mantra was essentially, deal with it. Sam believed that sulking doesn't get anyone anywhere, and I think he actually took a lot of pride in his ability to push through difficult times. He felt right at home in tech, where the everything's fine, I'm crushing it mentality suited him well. And because of this can-do attitude, Sam was promoted to a managerial position in his company really quick. And although he was a smart leader, he was not a particularly empathetic leader. When people came to him for help with problems that were not strictly technical, he told them, essentially, to deal with it and sent them on their way. So over time, his team started to learn not to bring their emotional selves to Sam. And in fact, in taking his example, they kind of tried to condition themselves out of even bringing their feelings to work at all. This led to the atmosphere of the team being one of vigilance and tension. Team members were having a lot of conflicts with each other, their work was suffering, and before long, Sam was starting to get less than stellar feedback on his performance reviews. His team felt really overwhelmed by his expectations, and they said that they feel devalued by him. So this completely floored Sam. This made no sense to him. He had no sense of himself devaluing anyone. And he started to feel a lot of stress and anxiety about this, and it was stress and anxiety that he couldn't just deal with. And this was when he and I started working together. So admittedly, the work with Sam started pretty slow. He knew he had things to work on, but he didn't really see the value in hashing out all kinds of emotions that didn't have an immediate solution. That wasn't really his way. But he did stick with it. And over time, he slowly started to make space for his emotional self. He did a lot of hard work, a lot of introspection, and it led him to realize that although his ability to deal with it had served him a lot and had acted as a strength at many times in his life, it was also getting in his way. He began to let himself see how much of a burden it felt at times to act like everything was fine when it's not. And he realized that maybe he was actually a little envious of all these people who were able to let themselves feel sad and overwhelmed and frustrated. Sam came to realize over time the ways in which he was pushing down in his team, without even realizing it, the things that he had learned to push down in himself. And as he became a little more comfortable with his own range of emotions, he began to make more space for the emotions of his team. He stepped up as a mentor, morale improved. Now, is Sam today the most emotional and empathetic person you've ever met? No, definitely not. The goal was never to get him there. Emotional fitness isn't about stripping yourself of the things that make you, you. It's about developing a system of self-inquiry that shows you when you're getting in your own way. To Sam's credit, he was already emotionally fit enough to face the difficult reality that his team members were unhappy with him, and he made the decision to work on identifying his emotions and increase his tolerance for the discomfort that those emotions gave him. This helped him make space for the emotions in his team. This improved communication, and on and on. So you kind of see where I'm going with this. All of these 7 pillars are really tied together. As you work on one, others will naturally improve. This is especially powerful in tech, where this process has a huge ripple effect. This is a far-reaching industry that is defining a lot about our world. An emotionally fit leader is going to cultivate emotionally fit employees. Emotionally fit employees are going to create emotionally fit products. Emotionally fit products are going to increase emotional fitness in its users. Okay, you're in a real position in this industry to kind of change the culture of a lot of things. And it all starts by looking inward. So I thought I'd leave you with some action items. If you feel ready to kickstart your emotional fitness regimen and some of those bigger suggestions feel like a little too much right now, and you just want to know what you can do right now, here are some things you could do in the next week. One of them is write down your known triggers. What are the things that happen either in your personal life or at work that flip your emotional switch really quick? What is it about that super annoying colleague that might help you understand something that you're sort of pushing away in your own self? All right, another suggestion would be start your next meeting with a check-in. So there are a lot of ways to do a check-in, but one thing you could do is have everyone go around at the beginning and give you a thumbs up, a thumbs middle, or a thumbs down. Thumbs up means, I'm great, I'm here, I'm ready, let's do this. Thumbs middle means, I'm a little distracted or I'm a little tired, but I'm here, it's fine. Thumbs down means, I am somewhere else, my butt's in the seat, but I am not here, I'm, dealing with stuff. And if you have time and desire, you might have people briefly tell you why their thumb is up, middle, or down. You don't necessarily need to do that. Now again, asking this question and having people explain this does not mean it's now your job to fix all of the thumbs downers' problems or to give all the thumbs uppers massive praise. It's just about saying, listen, I know you're bringing your emotions into this meeting, whether you want to or not, so let's make space for it for a second and get on the same page and understand where we're all at. It's also going to help the person presenting take it less personally when the person who gave the thumbs down isn't really paying attention because you've now taken a temperature of the room. So this is one way that you can sort of integrate emotional fitness and check-ins at work. Another thing you might do is play a game with your team. There are all kinds of amazing games that work really well at work. And if you want ideas for them, please reach out to me. I have a whole packet that I've put together of games that are really great to play in a tech setting. So feel free to reach out to me and I will send you one of those. But play in general is really great for team bonding and silliness. And sometimes we just have to take ourselves a little less seriously. Another thing you might do is meditate for 10 minutes. So meditating is uncomfortable, and you're just sitting there silently, and you're trying not to think, but of course you're thinking, and it's tough. But it's actually really helpful to foster this ability to sit with yourself. As a person with pretty legitimate ADHD, meditating was always really hard for me. It almost felt impossible for me. And over time, meditating 10 minutes every morning, I actually went a really long way. And not only did it get easier to sit for those 10 minutes, but it also just got easier to be with myself throughout the day. Also, my posture improved, so that was a plus. All right, so if not meditating, then perhaps reach out to a peer or a mentor you respect. Reach out to someone before you need them. Let someone know that you met at the LESS conference, that their impact was really positive, and you're glad that your lives crossed paths, right? To start to build a community not out of necessity, but out of caring is really helpful. And then, of course, is going to be even more helpful when you do ultimately need support. Like with physical fitness, it can be really tough to get started with emotional fitness, and it's not always comfortable, and it's not always fun. But the more you integrate it into your life, the easier it's going to be to keep it going. So please feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want to keep the conversation going, and thank you so much for having me.